It's time now for the Success is Subjective podcast. Here is your host and therapeutic consultant for young adults only, Joanna Lilley.
Hi, and welcome to the show. I know the anxiety that comes with watching a loved one struggle with a nonlinear path. This podcast was created to fight back against the narrow picture of success painted by social media. Each week, we share authentic stories from people who changed course, maybe failed, and ultimately found their own definition of success. These are the stories you need to hear to prove that changing your mind is common and you don't have to have it all figured out at 18. So if you're a parent or you're a young adult looking for a little proof, you're home. Now let's get into today's episode. If you'd like to explore how I can help your young adult, you can schedule a free consultation through my website link in the show notes. Today, my guest is Dr. Chris Putnam. Dr. Putnam advances the personal, spiritual, and intellectual formation of his students. Integrating principles of mental health and higher education, he cultivates environments that promote resilience, self-awareness, and purpose-driven learning. His work centers on fostering meaningful connection and reflective growth as essential elements of the educational experience. Dr. Putnam has a really fascinating course correction in terms of his career switch, but I'm going to let you hear all about it during this interview, so let's not wait any longer. Here's Dr. Putnam. Chris, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
No, thanks for having me. I'm super excited. I've been waiting for this moment. So thank you.
I'm excited because we recently connected, but it felt very serendipitous to quickly turn around and also invite you to be a guest on the podcast. So let's just dive right in. Why don't you tell our listeners, where did you grow up and what was the messaging that you were getting about what you were supposed to do after high school?
So I'm from Central Texas. I grew up in a couple little towns, Fredericksburg and Kerrville, and they're just west of Austin. And I graduated from Fredericksburg High School. And when I graduated, there was just kind of really no guidance or no really anything. It was go into the military, go to college, find a job. I kind of made my own path. I didn't have any hard expectations from family that I had to do this or had to do that. I wasn't in line to inherit a business, so I wasn't forced to do something I didn't want to do. I had a self-guided transition into adulthood.
So okay, that's awesome. That's actually really helpful to hear because I do feel like sometimes there's more messaging, or at least it's more common to hear about some sort of direction or perceived path. And a lot of it can be sometimes influenced by family, either what they're wanting or their clear expectations for this emerging, adult or emerging young adult. That's actually refreshing to hear that that was not your experience. So then I just immediately transitioned to a place of curiosity of like, what did you end up doing?
So yeah, it sounded a lot better than it may have actually been because everything had to happen organically. Everything, with no guidance, with really no, and I'm not being critical of my parents or family. They did a wonderful job, the best that they could do. I wasn't ever in trouble or anything like that, but we were all surviving. And so one of the things that I was going to go into the military, and I decided against that, and I kind of fumbled around for about a year, and I decided that I'd always been interested in funeral homes and funeral directing, and might as well start early. And so I enrolled in 1994, and I graduated in 1995, and I spent 30 years as a funeral director.
I mean, I think that I remember you like briefly telling me that, but as you're talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, 30 years too. That's a long time. That is a career.
Well, it is a long time. And part of the reason why it was so long, and well, part of the reason, the only reason, because it is very stressful. It's very emotional. There's 30 years of pictures in my head that I can't get out. I decided at age 25, 26 that I was going to start my own funeral home. And this was a big deal because, these are big projects. This is lots of money, lots of debt, lots of embedding yourself into a community. And at 26, I opened the doors of my first funeral home, and I worked it for 22 years. And I had a couple satellite locations and a couple other ventures on the side. So it was a long career, mainly because I got stuck with it, because it's really kind of hard to sell a funeral home when you're in that building phase from conception all the way to succession.
Interesting. Okay. Well, and now I certainly know you, like having met you professionally, that is not what you're doing now. So fill us in on how you did end up transitioning out of that space and walk us through the journey that led you to where you are and what it is that you're doing now.
So I've always been people focused and relationship focused. And I think that's one of the things that made me a really good funeral director is I'm a bit of an empath, and I can sometimes feel and connect dots before they're told or before other people might be able to see them. But I decided that I would start going to school. It was I never did get to finish my bachelor's when I was transitioning into mortuary school. I didn't get to do anything like that. So I decided that I would go ahead and start. So I received a bachelor's in business administration, and then I was kind of in the groove. So I did an MBA, and then I did a PhD in business administration, and my specializations in organizational leadership. And really one of the reasons why I did this is because being a funeral director, I couldn't take vacations. If I went to play golf, I'd get on the second or third hole and have to turn around and go back to work. So this was something that it was an outlet for all the emotion and things that I was going through in the funeral industry. So I knew that I would be retiring, and I wanted to complement my doctorate with a systems type degree. And so I went and got I started. I wasn't going to finish. I just wanted a few hours to get the basics of marriage and family therapy. And this was to work on relationships within an organization or business, nonprofit, for-profit, government, whatever it may be. And it turns out I liked it. I liked therapy. And so I finished the degree, and now I work as a therapist in Texas. And I also teach at a local university, business administration.
I love hearing that story because I think you named it, but as somebody that obviously wasn't living your experience, I'm kind of hearing it like connecting those dots in terms of the strengths in relationship that you have, like literally just being able to be present with a person, right? If we're talking about whether they're showing up in therapy, asking for some sort of support, guidance, like listening, it feels eerily similar, I imagine, in these moments of working with a funeral director where now all of a sudden we need to celebrate and acknowledge a lost life. And so like just again being present, but like here's the silver lining in closing that chapter as a funeral director is that I hope that you're able to take vacations now.
Oh, yes, it's a lot different now. I think, though, one of the hardest parts with the transition from the funeral service into mental health is that in the funeral service, I was a fixer. This is raw grief. This is where the kind of grief where you open your mouth and no words come out. And so I kind of said, I've spent a life kind of being a vet. You're looking at something, an animal, and it can't tell you what it needs. You just have to kind of guess. And so my instincts really were developed. It's a big strength of mine after all those years and hundreds and even in well within the thousands of funerals that I did. But what's difficult transitioning into the mental health field is I'm not a fixer. I'm a listener, and it's up to me to guide, and it's up to me to from a therapy standpoint to help clients or patients find their own answers and solutions. And so as I'm practicing in this new field, I'm getting better and better at that. But my instinct is to fix, and I have to fight that.
I appreciate you sharing that, because I can see how it would be like a conflict, right, in terms of how you were kind of operating previously. But I do think that the consistent that you named too was just being an empath definitely helps too. Like that's a consistent thread. So let me ask this question now that we have kind of heard what your 30 plus years of kind of like your own educational and professional journey leading to what it is that you're doing today. Do you see yourself as successful?
I do. That was a struggle though for many, many years, is what is success, and who is they? Who am I trying to prove anything to? That's a lot of even the doctorate. I made it sound so nice and easy that, well, naturally I would just do this. No, naturally I wouldn't do that. It's like I had to prove that I could. And I think as I get older, I wonder, who did I really have to prove that to? And still don't really know. I mean, I'm proud that I did it. I don't want to do it again, but the outcome of the achievement was not what I thought I was going to get, mainly because I didn't know what I needed.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, you raise a good point there too, because I do think that a lot of, it almost is a more philosophical or existential type question of like me even presenting that and then thinking through the answer being, well, who am I comparing myself to be able to define that? And am I actually doing these things to prove to, whoever quote unquote they, right, or we will be? And so I think it's helpful just for anybody listening to this podcast that's a big part of the consistent messaging that guests that come on even talk about, is just like the whole point of this podcast is that the definition of success is entirely independent to or individualized to the guest who's showing up, and the lens that they have, the values that they have, like how they were raised, coming to their own example of why and what success truly is. And so I just love that you brought that up and answered it the way that you did. All right. So you're a therapist in Texas. You're also a parent coach. You're also a professor. You're also a business owner, right? Consistently. And we'll make sure that we have all of the links for everything that you're doing in the show notes, including contact, to make sure if anybody is listening to this, they're like, hey, I definitely want to connect with Chris. So let me ask this bigger question moving forward, because I actually think that this might be, again, unique to you, since you have had several career paths. I mean, that's what we'll call it. And with different educational kind of requirements or paths. If there's a parent listening to this podcast right now and their young adult, like the parent is not really putting pressure on their young adult in any capacity, like, no, you figured out what it is that you want to do. Is there some advice, some piece of advice that you would give to that parent right now to help them? And it's almost like a reflection back on like, Chris, circa 18, what do you wish that somebody had told your parents to better support you in that moment?
So that's a really good question. And I'm trying to, well, as you were asking, I was going, okay, which hat is going to answer that? Is it going to be the therapist? Is it going to be the professional, the professor? What in the world?
Let's do it all, Chris. Let's do it all.
Yeah, because, as an 18-year-old, some of the things I haven't necessarily been keeping from this podcast, but there was a lot of shame-based learning in my background. I'm dyslexic, and there was this always, well, you're not smart enough, you're not working hard enough, you may be lazy, and this was the 70s and 80s. We do things hopefully different today. And so I was never really, while I was physically safe in a nurturing and loving environment. I was not in a very safe environment growing up in school. And so maybe that's where hey, I'm going to work myself half to death to prove that I'm not lazy. And I'm going to get these advanced degrees and stuff to prove that I'm not stupid. So with the 18-year-old, if it was me going back, I would hope that I would say, don't take life so serious. You have really nothing to prove, and you don't have to work yourself where you go to sleep at 27 and you wake up and you're 47. There's a lot of years there that you made a huge impact on many people, but it came at a personal toll. As a therapist and parenting coach, I would want parents to just provide the safest mental safeness or environment that they can. Don't have the hard expectations, because one of the reasons is that this is a life stage transition. This is a big deal, going from late adolescence into early adulthood and not being really prepared. So this is a shock on the family system and on the individual student. They may do things that you see as defiant or disruptive or self-destructive. Listen to behavior rather than disciplining actions. If they're starts to be a little bit of possible consumption of alcohol or other things that you might not agree with, and by goodness, that's not how we raised our child, lean into it and find out why. What is it soothing? What safety is your kiddo needing, even though the kiddo is like 20 years old? So I think that just being mindful that it's scary to grow up. So just be patient and be respectful to the child, and let them be safe to come to you when you're needed.
Yeah, that's profound advice, because in this day and age too, like you said, a 20-year-old is still a kid, right? There's still so much dependency that exists, whether it's financial, emotional, like you name it. We still want to provide that kind of open door for love and support. And I think that's where that shift comes in that you're kind of talking about. Like, don't look at some of the behaviors, but instead kind of get curious and get to the core of what's really going on, which I appreciate coming from you, putting on that therapist and parent coach hat, because that's what this podcast is about. It's, if you're a parent listening to this and you're like, hey, I haven't worked with a parent coach, Chris sounds like a perfect person that might be able to help me shift into like adjusting parenting my adolescent or young adult right now. Again, contact information will be in the show notes, so don't hesitate, reach out. And then I also think, again, because of your lived experience, Chris, this is what I love about the guests that come on the show, is like, everybody's so unique. And you are the very first, it says a lot. This is like, we're in the 340s at this point in terms of episodes. You're the very first that is like in that funeral services industry.
Yeah, that's really, I guess, kind of awesome. It's I will add, because I was reflecting, because I've been retired almost 5 years now, and before this podcast, what was so unique about that career? And there's so many things, but I think the most unique is when I started, we had people who were born in the 1800s. I wrote obituaries and I lived these experiences that they had during World War I and World War II, and segregation and all the milestones and stuff that we see in history books. I got to get to know either these people before they passed away or after they had died, the Bataan Death March, you name it, all of these critical historical moments I got to be a part of in a way. So rather than just my parents, my grandparents' generation, I kind of got exposed to additional generations.
Chris, thank you for taking the time to not just like pop on and share your story, but talk about the work that you're doing, because I know that there's going to be at least one person listening to this that's going to want to reach out to you and connect. And so again, here's my call to action. If you are at all remotely interested in connecting with Chris, please reach out. We'll make sure, like I said, all contact information will be in the show notes. Chris, thanks again for carving out some time and sharing your story.
Well, thanks for having me, and good luck to everyone. And everybody has their own unique story, and live your life giving grace to yourself and being happy with yourself. Thanks for having me.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. We want to thank our guest for joining Joanna on the show this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email joanna@lilleyconsulting.com. Be sure to check out the lilleyconsulting.com website for additional resources outside of podcasting. Now, if you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on other popular podcast apps, such as Audible, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Thanks again for listening in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.